Imagine a world without apples, avocados, coffee beans, lemons, almonds, or honey. That world you're imagining is a world without bumblebees. These seemingly abundant foods are the start of a long list of items that will cease to grow without the pollination of our unacknowledged friends, the bumblebees. The source of the issue? Pesticides. Pesticides are destroying the habitat of the bees as well as harming human life and our environment. If we do not help the bees in the fight against pesticides, some of America's most loved foods will become a retro memory of the sweeter past, and the damage done to our earth will be irreversible. The bee colonies are collapsing. Recent numbers have determined in some cases up to 90% decrease in bees. There are a few situations that play into the loss of these colonies, but the biggest problem is pesticides. We need bees for pollination, but why do plants need pollination? Pollination is the act of transferring pollen grains from the male anther of a flower to the female stigma. And the goal of every living organism, including plants, is to reproduce. Successful pollination allows plants to produce seeds, and seeds are the key to producing the next generation of plants, which provide food for the next generation of pollinators and other wildlife. If plants are not pollinated, they will not be able to produce fruit, and they will not be able to reproduce for future harvests. Applying pesticides to our crops is causing a ripple effect in many different areas, hurting our humans, our environment, and killing our bees. Biologists testing pollen found 150 different chemical residues in the harvested pollen. When the polluted pollen is harvested, the bees draw a certain amount of nutrients to strengthen themselves, and when the food is packed full of chemicals, it puts them on their deathbed. In money terms, without the bees, that's a loss of $15,150 million. Without pollinators, there will be no crops to grow, and without these crops, there will be no profit, and without profit, there will be no farmers. Surprisingly enough, dousing crops with tainted chemicals doesn't only hurt the bees, the environment is drastically affected as well as human health. In total, worldwide deaths and chronic diseases due to pesticide poisoning number about 1 million per year. The amount of organisms that are affected by the abundant use of these chemicals is astounding and simply uncalled for. Contrary to what the pesticide companies believe, the health of our environment and our population is significantly more important than a large crop. On the other hand, without pesticides to ward off uninvited insects, America's crop count would decrease tremendously. Without pesticides, anywhere from 20 to 90% of a harvest could be damaged. This would lead to a lower supply per harvest and thus a higher cost per pound of produce. This demonstrates a considerable pro for the use of pesticides, but unfortunately the advantages do not outweigh the disadvantages. Now there are 3 solutions to this problem. Number 1, stop using pesticides and opt for completely organic methods of farming. Number 2, avoiding the most toxic chemicals and instead opting to use biodegradable practices that cause no harm to the environment. And number 3 comes down to the hands of every individual. The bees need nutrients that is not pumped full of chemicals to continue pollination. We can aid by planting pollinator gardens to help the bumblebees get the nutrient-filled, chemical-lacking pollen that they need to do their jobs. We have to keep the bees in business. Without the bees, 88% of our food would be a distant memory. The use of chemicals on crops needs to be reduced tremendously, if not terminated entirely. There are ways that we can solve this bee crisis. All we need to do is take action. People need bees, and now bees need people.